We know in the gospel these stories of the calling of the apostles, of Peter and Andrew, James and John, of Matthew, the tax collector, Nathanael sitting under the tree, and so many of their stories, how our Lord came to them and called them to leave behind their former way of life and to come and follow him in a new way. What I like in this gospel today is that we see that not only does Christ call the 12, but also he's calling forth many others, many others. Today we hear of 3 in particular, of Mary Magdalene, Joanna, and Susanna. And each of them maybe have their own particular qualities. Christ calls Mary Magdalene, right? He calls her after freeing her from 7 demons, casting them out of here. Here was kind of this is a big deal. A woman who was possessed, who was doing, if she was possessed, probably lots of evil things. Christ freed her and called her to leave behind that way of life, radically to leave it behind and to come and follow him on a new path. And she did, and she would be the one who would be there at the foot of the cross, the one who was possessed with demons. She would be the one who would be the first to see the risen Lord and to announce his resurrection. And then we hear of Joanna, who was the wife of Herod's steward Chuza. She was a woman who had great power. Her and her husband having this important position in Herod's court, they would have wielded great influence and power and control, and lots of people would have looked to them and to what they said, what they believed. And maybe, probably even for them, it would have been dangerous, right, for her to follow Christ right under Herod's nose. And so for Joanna, we see someone who was a woman of great influence, who Christ also called, right? Someone possessed by a demon, someone who had great worldly influence. And then thirdly, we hear of Susanna. And what do we know about her? I looked up, just did a quick Google check, nothing. We really don't know, it doesn't seem anything about her. And maybe that's the point, right? Maybe that's the point, that Christ also calls this seemingly insignificant woman, who isn't someone who's really possessed or someone who has lots of worldly influence, but is just an ordinary, average, run-of-the-mill person. And Christ calls her and has a plan for her and wants her to be part of his mission and work. For me, so happy to read of these 3 women, and for me, the one I identify with the most is Susanna, right? No great qualities, no great abilities, just a simple person who God has called to follow him. And for you, maybe, who do you identify with? Christ called all of them, right? And he calls all kinds of different people, for sure. As we're on the lookout today for people who we pass by as we're doing our work and doing our thing today, keep an eye out, right? That Christ may want to call out to someone who we cross paths with. It could be someone who's far from him, like Mary Magdalene was. It could be someone who is a person of influence, who's doing lots of great things. It could be just your simple, run-of-the-mill, just average person who almost seems insignificant and totally unimportant, who Christ wants us to call forth and to come to serve him in a new way. In the name